African Union summit has just concluded in Equatorial Guinea. Leaders discussed terror threats on the continent and unconstitutional changes of government. 4 countries are currently suspended from the AU following coups. The continent is also facing worsening humanitarian crises. Ahead of the summit, the Human Rights Watch had said it's an opportunity to address all of these issues. Well, for more, I'm joined now by Human Rights Watch's Africa Advocacy Director, Karine Kaneza Natulia. Thank you for your time. So let me just check with you then. The summit has come and gone. You had expectations about the possibility to seize the moment and address some of these concerns around unconstitutional changes of government, etc. Has the moment been seized by this summit in Malabo?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for having me. Yes, we do believe that there was the moment was seen as an opportunity by the African Union leaders themselves. It's important to highlight some of the opening remarks on sovereignty, for instance, made by the AU chairperson of the Commission. The state sovereignty as an impediment to the AU's ability to tackle terrorism and unconstitutional changes of government. Mr. Ambassador Faki did mention he had a take on double standards, but he focused on funding, and we would have wished, for instance, to see a mentioning of mistreatment of Africans in the context of the Ukrainian war and by Ukraine and other surrounding countries. But let's focus on the regional dynamics. There was strong mentioning of climate change, migration, but less on domestic dynamics such as abuses by states agents. We do know that there were behind the scenes discussions on how to strengthen the rule of law and the governance. There were discussions about boosting financial and economic independence, but obviously what we would like to see is a more scrutiny on in terms of the extent to which this independence is intrinsically linked to the fact that the rule of law has to be applied. There was a lot of discussions around the aspect of social contract between the state and the citizens and how to boost the trust of the citizens to vis-a-vis their respective states and the tools that the African Union governance architecture can offer. However, we would like to see a further unpacking of what a resilient and healthy social contract is, because it will be amiss not to highlight how in most countries prone to political instability and uprising, impunity and states abuses are at the heart of the crisis. So in a nutshell, yes, there were discussions, but what we need to see now are robust actions taken.
And within that framework of talking about robust actions being taken, is it your sense that anything new needs to be added to the equation in as far as realizing the noble objectives that were present at the founding of the AU and the other organs and structures of governance that it put in place? Or is it simply a matter of fidelity to what we've already agreed upon? As you talk about impunity in some of the countries, there are mechanisms that are already in place. Human rights, democratization, all of these are things that are already provided for. So does it feel to you like we need to have a conversation about adding anything new, or is it simply a matter of summits such as the one that is just concluded, mapping out implementation and acceleration plans?
I think we need to look at it from a domestic and a regional perspective. Domestically, we need to see meaningful, effective security sector reform, for instance. The promises of reforms that have not been fulfilled, establishment of civilian rule, and especially looking at the freedoms of expression and assembly, which in most of these countries have been violated. You have protesters, you have peaceful protesters still lingering in jail. You have activists. You have a shrinking of civic space that is worrying. And those are some of the actions that do not necessarily require new frameworks or new tools, but just political will. And that is the call that we will continue to make. We need to see a more stringent, a more coordinated, stringent scrutiny, but also coordination between the AU Commission and the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, for instance. We saw a lot of mentioning of, as you mentioned, different governance tools, including the AU Charter on Democracy, Governance, Elections, the Convention on for the Prevention and the Fight against Terrorism, but not a lot of mentioning, for instance, of our regional human rights institution and frameworks, and that's where we see a gap that needs to be fulfilled. It requires political will. It requires a more genuine, really, examination of where we are in terms of the state of human rights on the continent.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights here on ENCA. That is Karine Kaneza Nantulia, who is Human Rights Watch's Africa Advocacy Director, weighing in on the just concluded AU summit that took place in Equatorial Guinea.